Let's move on to our next segment.
Money, money.
Can I ask a dumb one?
Are you asking a dumb question? Are you asking a dumb person? We may never know, but let's ask this one.
Okay, so this question's from Amanda. Now listen, like I said last week, y'all's questions are too long. So Amanda, love you down. We cut your question by it's a quarter of your original question. We answered your first one. We're going to try to answer your first one. So Amanda asks, what are the implications during retirement of having some of my current contributions to my 401k as traditional and some as Roth? I understand that we would owe tax on the traditional 401k distributions and other employer match, but are there other things that would trigger, limit, affect, or disqualify us from?
I always like to put things in perspective, and there's like big deals and there's small deals. Big deal. Don't bury yourself in debt. Live below your means. Invest early and often. That's the big deal. If you do those things, you'll be in great shape. Choosing between Roth and traditional investments in your 401k is a small deal. Not only is it a small deal, but it's impossible to know the perfect answer ahead of time without knowledge of the future, because it requires knowing what's going to happen to tax brackets in the future, what tax bracket you're going to be in the future, things like that where you can't perfectly decide now. But I'll still give you the answer. But broad strokes, if you are not getting into a bunch of debt, living below your means, earning well, saving, investing along the way, you're going to be in great shape. So you don't need to kill yourself over these small decisions. That said, there's three main types of tax statuses in investments. One is a regular taxable account. So if I go to Fidelity and I click open up brokerage account and put money in and buy shares of VTI and ETF, that is just the regular old tax status, which means if I do that, or if I buy a gold bar and store it in my basement, and then those things go up in value, the government is going to want a piece of that when I sell it on a capital gain. The second one is Roth. If you put money into a Roth 401k or IRA, then you're never taxed on the gains ever again. And so it's kind of like, I like to think of it with the analogy of seeds. If you are paid in seeds with a taxable brokerage account out of your paycheck, like let's say you get paid 10 seeds, you pay income tax on your seeds. So you pay 3 seeds and you have 7 seeds remaining. You plant those 7 seeds, it grows to 7 trees, and the government says, hey, you just went from seeds to trees. We got some of those trees, and we're going to take 2 trees, and now you have 5 trees. That's like the normal tax status. With a Roth, you still pay income tax. Your 10 seeds of paycheck go to 7 seeds, but then the trees are never harvested from the government. So you get all 7 trees later on. You're never taxed again. The last status is traditional. With traditional, you don't pay tax on your income. So let's say you paid 10 seeds. All 10 seeds can go into a traditional 401k or IRA. But then when they grow and they're harvested, when you take the withdrawals out, then you do pay the government based on that income. And so your 10 trees become 7 trees. And so it's like Roth, 7 trees, traditional, 7 trees, taxable brokerage account, 5 trees. And so both Roth and traditional are better tax treatment than just a regular old investment account, but they're slightly different. And so those are 3 types of buckets. Having both or having all 3 has some nice advantages. And so let's say you have some Roth, have some traditional. What that does is it gives you some flexibility to choose which bucket you withdraw from in retirement. So let's say you have a very, very low income year. Let's say you're 60 years old, you're retired, and then for 1 year you have zero income. There's a level of income tax under which you owe zero income tax. And so you could pull from your traditional investments, and even though tax is owed, that tax rate will be 0. And so that's a nice way to pay no tax when you earn the money because it goes in tax-free because it's traditional, and no tax when you withdraw because you're in a very low income year. If you are in a very high income year, like let's say you sell a bunch of stock in a taxable account and you have a bunch of income or whatever it is, then you can say, okay, I don't want to touch my traditional because that would be taxed at a high tax bracket at a high rate. I'll pull from my Roth. And so having the 2 buckets kind of gives you some opportunity to maybe do some arbitrage on staying under the low tax bracket if you can. That said, there are some other, you asked about trigger, limit, effect. I don't really know what all those words mean in your context, but there are some other implications of investing in a traditional account. One is that when you put money into a traditional account, the government has never been paid income tax on it. And the government doesn't like that. And so they have this thing called RMDs, required minimum distributions. That means at age 73, they force you to start taking money out. And so that could be a negative impact because, like, let's say you're in a high tax bracket because you still are killing it in your 70s. Now you get forced to, subject your withdrawals to this high tax bracket against your wishes. And, for young people, you're like, oh my God, 73, that might as well be, a million. But like my parents are in that age range and they're very concerned about their RMDs, right? That's like something that becomes a big deal when you're that age. Another thing is Social Security. After a certain age, when you start taking Social Security, that Social Security may be taxable if you have enough other income. And so if you're pulling money from your traditional because you want to, you need to, or because of the RMDs, that could cause your Social Security to become taxable, which is another implication. And another one is Medicare premiums. Again, with Medicare, when you are old, you get basically government-sponsored health insurance. You have to pay more for that, and it gets complex beyond the scope of this podcast if you have a lot of other income. And so basically, if you put all your money into traditional to lower your tax burden while you're working, you might be increasing your tax burden later due to these reasons: RMDs, Social Security, Medicare premiums. All that said, is it's still not that huge of a deal because you don't, they're both preferred to taxable brokerage account. You don't know which one's going to be better. I think there's lots of reasons to like Roth. Jen, me, and Vivi and Shane, all the PFC employees, we all do Roth contributions because we want to never ever pay tax again, and it kind of insulates you from all future tax hikes. Let's say Social Security is going insolvent, and then they want to come after high income earners. That Roth is protected. Who knows? I mean, there could be World War III and they could just drain our accounts or something. I don't know. But based on the stability of the government as we hope it continues to exist, Roth is protected from future tax hikes. All that said is there's a calculator. If you Google Nectarine calculator, Nectarine is our flat fee financial advice marketplace. We can find a flat fee financial advisor, and we have some cool calculators on there. So if you Google Nectarine calculator, there's an advanced retirement calculator that lets you put in Roth, traditional, and taxable contributions. And then you can see how it affects your likelihood of a successful retirement, how it affects your total growth of investments, how it affects your income in retirement. And so it's nice to play with those numbers. And I think you'll probably see it's not going to make or break you, but for sure, you are going to pay tax on traditional when you pull it out. And more generally speaking, we're talking about Nectarine. Amanda, you asked a very complex question. And when I saw this, I was like, Jen, this is a lot for a podcast. And I've been yapping a lot on your question already. It's probably worth sitting down with a financial advisor. And, Nectarine, like I said, is flat fee financial advisors. So these are advisors who don't sell any products, don't earn commissions, and don't charge you a % of your assets. Instead, you just pay them by the hour or by the project, which is my preferred way to hire a financial advisor. I always have been pitching this to people for years. This is how you should pay financial advisors. They always said, how do I find one of those? I always said, I don't know, because I can't find them myself. And so that's why we built Nectarine. So we have a great resource for that. So that's my answer, Amanda. Jen, how long-winded was that? I'm always trying to become less long-winded, and it's not going well.
Listen, for once, I'm blaming Amanda. Like we really, you tried. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like maybe she needs to go check out Nectarine. But hopefully we got a little bit into her question and she can take it from here. So good job.